Alrighty folks, welcome back to another video from Yates Computers Tips and Reviews. So head on over there, hit the subscribe, hit the bell, come on back. Last video I touched on was RAID is not a backup. That is very important information to know. Nowadays, there is a lot of backup solutions out there. Everything wants to go out to the cloud. The cloud, the cloud, the cloud, the cloud. This is a kind of a security concern. It's always been a security concern because I've mentioned it, I believe, in past videos and other things. You do not control those servers. That is a crucial, important thing. You are backing up your data to a server out on the internet that someone else has control of, has security of. If you know security, you understand all that, you're putting your security in someone else's hands. You're putting that data in someone else's hands that you need to trust. If you need to do a backup, if you need to do a restore, you need to be able to do that. Best practice is still to have an on-site copy of it and not just out on the cloud. Best practice is to have 2 to 3 copies of your data. And that could be simply RAID, USB backup, cloud backup, whatever other forms of backup you want to use. You want to use a tape drive, you want to use any of that type of stuff to have that. That is really the best way to secure all your data. But I wanted to touch base on that because I hear a lot of just go on Microsoft's backup. The new thing that they're going to be pushing, I think, either with Windows 11 or 12, that now Microsoft will back up your data through their cloud service. You have to have their Microsoft login and all of that, and it'll back. Where is that being saved? What kind of security do you have on that? You have your tax paperwork, you have your banking paperwork, you have all that type of personal information that's going to get backed up and saved. Want to make people aware of the data you actually have on there you're putting out onto the cloud. I'm sure everybody remembers the Apple breach with all the celebrity photos and all of that type of stuff that was out on the cloud that was supposed to be perfectly safe and all of that. That are still, I guess, floating around or whatever. There's all that data that can be exposed. And I want to make sure people are aware of that security concern. But of course, you have to do a backup, and you need to be safe, and you need to secure things. But there also might be certain things you don't want out on the cloud. And I've mentioned this before. Pretty much once you put it out there, or once it's out there, it's out there. Because also a lot of these cloud services replicate and store data in multiple servers. It's not in one server. It's in multiple places, and it can be in multiple countries around the world. Because that's how they have redundancy, and that's how they have their backups to their data. If you're in a business, you'll learn that when you do cloud backups. There's regionals and zones and all these other things that you need to know to make sure your backups are safe, that you can actually do backups. If there's a disaster in New York and you're in New York, where is your secondary backup? Hopefully it's not New York, because if everything's down in New York, you can't do backup in New York for secondary. Usually it's in somewhere else, like the Mideast, other state, country, and then there's a fallback that's further away from there, so that you can always have a reliable source to, if all of the East Coast loses power, at some point or another, it's going to go through the relay chain, and if it has to go to the West Coast to back up, it'll go to the backup in the West Coast. So that kind of is a really interesting thing because that now means your data's all across the country. So this is kind of those weird little issues that are out there that I wanted to press and let people be aware of. Because I just hear, yeah, just go on into this and do that. You don't know where that data's at. Knowing that cloud safety, knowing where that data goes when you send it on the cloud is very important. Who has access to that? Who can get access to it? How many copies of that data is there? Once you send it out and there's 50 copies automatically created of that data, you got to make sure you're not sharing stuff that you don't want to have shared. Don't want to get into too much of those things. People will figure out what I mean. But that's the safety concern that I have with that cloud backup type stuff. Knowing proper providers, if it's encrypted, all of that on their network, if it's encrypted where nobody has plain view of that data, all of those things come into play. So this is where you got to do your homework, you got to do your research, because I can't answer those questions, because depending on the provider, depending on the plan, depending on how much data, all that kind of stuff, it's all going to be different. And what it is today, what it is tomorrow, what it is next year can be all completely different. Of course, they're going to update their security and they're going to bring new features in and all those type of things. So doing your homework, do your research, find out what's new, what's coming in, all those type of things that are out there. Because that's important. It's important to know that information. It's important that you understand those liabilities and what's out there, and to make sure somebody actually tells you that these liabilities and these issues are out there. If your computer gets a virus and gets taken over, how do you restore? How do you get that data? If that's your only computer and you're trying to restore to it and it don't work, how are you going to get to that point? These are some of those things I want you to think about. If you have to do a clean OS and load, get it all ready. Load the drivers in so you can even get to the internet. Log into that site. Pull all of that to re-image your computer. You need to know that. This is out on the cloud. How do you get to the cloud if your computer's no good? If you can't log in, you can't sign it. If it's ransomware and you can't do anything with it, how are you going to recover? These are some of those factors I wanted to bring up because I know it, but has everybody else really thought of these factors? Yeah, you just log into this account. There's some factors there before you just log into an account that they don't tell you. There's a huge area there. And if that's your only system, well, and what if you have 3 terabytes of data that you got to download? Where are you going to put it? If you have 2 computers and you got to move 3 terabytes that you downloaded from computer A to computer B to re-image, that means you have to have a 4 terabyte or larger external hard drive. Knowing these factors can save you a headache later. Knowing that you think you're safe and everything's great, and then you run into these problems, how much does that drive cost? Okay, it's not that hard, but it's going to cost you a drive. It's going to cost you a lot of time to download 3 terabytes onto that drive and then to restore. So these are some of those factors I wanted to bring out because I don't hear anybody saying these. Nobody's telling you the true sides of these things. These are all things you can research and do your homework and you'll see this is what you're going to need to do. But knowing this now is a great feature than learning it when you need it. Because you might be in a place where, or a time you can't just run out and get a drive. What if you're out in the country, 30 miles from town? You're going to just jump in the car and run into town? What if it's 2 in the morning? So these are some things you need to think about, be aware of, and thank you all so much for watching, and I'll be moving on to the next video.